Hey, what's going on out there? I'm Sean Devine. Hope you all are doing well. Today's video, we are going to be talking about why your kicks, 808s, and sub bass suck. This is not meant to discourage you whatsoever. We're going to go through some things that are going to make this much easier, and it's going to allow you to get more consistent in terms of how you're mixing these low-end elements. So let's go ahead and dive in here. I'm going to play back this beat idea that I put together very quickly for the sake of the example. But I want you to listen closely to what's going on in the low end, the kick, the 808, or the sub bass. And then we're going to talk about some things to consider here. All right. So did any of you notice anything peculiar with the 808 or the sub? No? Well, that's cool. I didn't either at first while I was working on this beat. I was actually mixing or listening to it on my laptop speakers. So these are some really low notes. So I want to point out the first reason why your kicks, 808s, and sub bass suck. And that is that some of these really low notes are actually out of key, or they are the incorrect notes. And this happens because you can't hear the note information or the pitch once you start getting below about 50 hertz. Now, I'm not saying that it's impossible to hear it. I'm just saying it becomes very difficult, and maybe you didn't hear it the first time around. So this note here, and it's hitting at around 30 hertz, which is just not something that you can pick out pitch as easily with. So the correct note is actually, so let me play that back for you. So hitting a lot better, and it just sounds a lot smoother. Now, how did I come across this issue, or how did I know that that note wasn't correct? I like to use a trick where I will use a pitch shifter just to shift everything up one octave. So I'm just going to move this plugin over here. I use this on a parallel chain that we're going to talk about that helps in another way here in a minute. But let me turn on the sound shifter, and this is just going to shift everything up 12 semitones or one full octave. And I want you to listen to it now. Okay, so it should be much more obvious now that this low note is incorrect. And we move it up. So obviously it sounds terrible with it, raised up an octave, but the idea here is simply to focus on the pitch information. Sometimes it's okay to have, a note that's not the correct key, have it dissonant and do it intentionally. So I'm not saying that you always want them to be in key. If you're doing that unintentionally, you're going to find later when you hear it played on big speakers that 808 is actually not in the right key, and it's very obvious. So moving on to the next tip here, and this is actually, again, building on how I found out that that low note was out of tune, and that is to process the 808 with something that's going to play back on small speakers better, or translate. So what do we mean by translate? Translate meaning, when you play it on smaller speakers, sometimes you're not going to be able to even hear the 808 at all, or the sub bass at all, or it just sounds really weak because your speakers aren't able to play it back. And that's because physically these smaller speakers can't reproduce these really low frequencies. So what we need to do is we need to generate harmonics, or we need to generate additional frequency content, higher frequency content that's going to be able to be played back on these smaller speakers. So to do that, I have created this parallel chain, and I've done exactly what we did there. I have just shifted this up 12 semitones. so that this is going to put us more towards, like 80 to 100 hertz. And then we're going to saturate it with this plugin One Knob from Waves. And then I'm also sidechaining it again, which we're going to talk about the sidechaining in a minute. But that chain sounds something like this. So we're getting a lot more information, from about 120 all the way up to like 500. But if I turn that off, we're not really getting anything above about 250, and that's not going to play back very well. So again, that just gives us that extra frequency information. And I want you to listen to that on some smaller speakers. So whether it's your laptop, your phone, your computer monitor, it's going to be a lot clearer what that sounds like and why we're adding that. Because when I play back that 808 without it, it's going to disappear. It's going to be very hard to pick out in the context of the mix. Third reason why your kicks, 808s, and sub bass suck is that you're not sidechaining your bass line with the kick drum. So a lot of you have got these really heavy kicks, which I have here. I mean, if I play this kick back, a lot of low end in that kick, nothing thin about it. And then along with this 808 playing at the same time, we've got to create some space. So we talk about this a lot in this style of music. The best option to me is really not to EQ it, because I want the 808 to be big and round, have a big low end, and I want my kick to sound really beefy and aggressive, and I don't want it to be thin. So I'm not going to EQ that. But what I can do, and I do this probably 70% of the time when I have a kick and an 808 or a sub, is to do some type of sidechaining. And so I've done that here on the 808, and you'll see here I've set the ratio pretty low. We've got a really fast attack so that as soon as that kick comes through the sidechain, it's going to trigger the compressor on the 808, bring that 808 level back, let the kick through, and then I have a really fast release. So it's going to release pretty much immediately once that kick comes back. So it's very fast, very subtle. The fourth reason why your kicks, bass, and sub bass suck is that you're selecting the wrong samples. So I've talked about sample selection and the importance of it in the production and even the mixing process. I do some sample replacement if I need to, and it's very important to pick kicks and basses that fit contextually and sonically. And so just for the sake of example here, what I'm going to do is just go into a folder of some kicks I have, and let's just play back. Let's just say that kick here. Let me put that in here, and then let's play this back now. Totally different feel. Now, again, I know I just reached into the folder and grabbed a kick, but these are some good kick samples in here that I've used before. It could be the best sample in the world, but it may not work with the bass line or the 808 sample that you're using. And so this concept goes the same for picking your 808s. You've got to pick sounds that are going to work with the instrumentation and the things that are going on there. All right, so the fifth and final reason why your kicks, 808s, and sub bass suck is that you have insufficient monitoring. So another thing that we talk about a lot is making sure that you're able to actually hear the low end. And that can be tricky if you're mixing on like a 5-inch monitor, or even if you have a room that's not properly treated. I'm in a room that is treated, however, it's not perfect. This left monitor over here, I have like a kind of a null in my room. And so there's a 60 hertz sort of roll off in this one speaker. So it's very hard for me to hear 60 hertz in that. So that's no fault of my ears. It's just where the monitors are in my room. For most of us, we're not going to be in perfectly tuned rooms, but I just want you to have the right expectations about monitors. If you have 5-inch monitors, I would not expect to be mixing, really low end heavy, 50 to 30 hertz music on there. Not to say it's impossible. It would be extremely difficult. Even if you jump and get a pair of really good headphones like the ones on my head, the DT770. On the open back side, I like the HD650 from Sennheiser. Both of these, I can easily hear what's going on in that 30 hertz, 40 hertz range. So not to say, if you have a pair of 5-inch monitors plus one of these headphones that'll go that low, you'll be able to do what you need to do in terms of referencing the bass. All right, so we've covered 5 reasons as well as some tips and thoughts to consider for why your kicks, 808s, and sub bass suck. I've found that low end is something that has taken me probably the longest to really get comfortable with, and I'm still learning about the way that my ears perceive things, about how I feel certain low end frequencies. And so it just takes some time, y'all. Don't get down or discouraged about this. If you have any questions or comments about what we covered, or maybe you have some things to add, we'd love to hear about them down in the comments section below. If you learned anything in the video, please like, subscribe, and consider sharing. We'll talk to you soon.
Seeing the light at the end of the tunnel, no time to debate it. Woke up this morning, my feet to the floor and the darkness is faded. It comes back around like the hope I found. And when I lift you up, will you hold me down? It keeps getting harder when we get farther away from who